Let me give you an example. By 2018, according to Ministry of Health, according to the Ministry of Health, 72% of the Ugandan population is living within a 5-kilometer radius to a health facility.
72%.
That would imply that health services are one, nearer to the people, but that they're actually accessing health services when they go to the facilities. But the remaining, the logistical gaps remain in terms of funding for medical supplies, in terms of the staffing levels for users to find a skilled medical worker. Those are the things that remain in place. You will find we have UPE schools dotted around a parish, dotted around a sub-county, meaning that every child, every girl can actually access basic education. But what is the quality of education that they're coming out with? And then there are the social factors, the gender factors that come in. Girl children are predominantly burdened. I do not want to use the word burdened. The demands on girl children to perform home care tasks, what we call unpaid care and domestic work, are quite high, that they take away from these girl children the time they would spend concentrating on school, they are spending on domestic work. If a housemaid, a nanny is needed in Kampala, they're the first ones to be pulled out. What are the checks to government to ensure that some of these things are not happening? So whereas we are seeing gains, we also see reversals. Sure. We also see that we are actually not progressing. The other example I could give is in terms of leadership. Right now we are at near parity. If I could speak about not near parity, but we've made strides in terms of representation of women in, say, in the national parliament.
Political representation.
Political representation. In the last parliament, in the 10th parliament, we're at 35% representation. In this parliament, we are at 33%. There's been a reduction, a drop. But what we want to see is that these women in parliament are active participants. Okay. We want them to increase their influence in parliament. We want them to be able to actually influence women-centered concerns, budgets for women, planning for women, laws and policies that work for women and girls. But are we seeing that? You know? So in as much as we see these gains, we continue to say that a lot more needs to be done. Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Chirenga, did you talk to me about the CSO-UPR process in how it works, or you just get me through it before you get out of studios?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jagenda. So what we do, we are the lead coordinator as a national coalition.
National coalition.
We coordinate in terms of, we bring together all these civil society actors.
How many are these?
We are talking about 23 clusters.
23.
Different clusters. Working on different thematic areas. Okay. Women's rights, environmental rights, civil political rights, socio-economic rights, the right to health, the right to education, all of them. So we bring them together to assess how far has our country or our government fulfilled its human rights obligations on women's rights, on civil and political rights, on the right to health, on the right to education, right to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of all these civil clusters. So we bring them together and they compile their reports. And those reports, we do it in conjunction with the government. As I told you, this is a state-driven process. So the data, the information you relay out there must be reliable and accurate. So we have to consult as much as possible the different government entities that have official statistics, and then we look at see how we can share these reports, and then we provide it. Now, the whole objective, as I told you earlier, is to see how we can improve on the human rights situation in the country. So basically what we do is that we lay the facts on the ground. This is what, we've done something, we acknowledge it, but a lot needs to be done, as my sister Susan was indicating.
Okay. Mr. Csoupr, what recommendations will you give to government in as far as this whole process is concerned before you get out of studios?
The first recommendation is what they call the Witness Protection Bill being enacted into law. Okay. Let me explain this.
Talk about that, because we have the whistleblowers, but the witness protection. Yes. Witness protection, I think, is also very important.
Yes, because what happens is that, for example, we treat and rehabilitate survivors of torture. So after treating and rehabilitating, we want to take it further so that they access justice, so that perpetrators of torture are punished. But there is fear. They tell you that, will you protect me? So So that this witness protection law will help these people to go on the witness stand and they
before the witness protection law, what do we have in the interim? There's something I think with the DPP. Witness something was,
that is, I think, now institutional, but it's not. I mean, it's what can I say? It's when you have a law in place, at least it's more
and
it's
how
more
feasible,
tangible.
How feasible, Mr. Csoupr, would that be? Because if I tortured Mr. Chirenga here, you treat him, he's a victim, and you want to take it further, and there is a law to actually protect him as a witness, and it comes back to me, why don't you think that I actually know that I am being prosecuted because of what I did to Chirenga? How feasible is it that when there is a protection law, Mr. Chirenga Ijagenda Semakola will come out to actually say, I can now witness, yet you very well know that the issue for which you're being persecuted, or prosecuted rather, is because of the things that I did to X, or Y, or Z.
Of course, you need to kind of explain to the witness that there is now you will be protected by the state. I mean, the state is the one who is going to protect you. Of course, now you have to kind of create awareness that so that the person also trusts the state will protect them. But I think it will be a step in the right direction, having this law in place, because there are so many cases where we would think the perpetrator would be punished, but the person goes off scot-free, and they
on that particular one, when you talk about punishing the perpetrators, like we said, in most cases, we look at the enforcers, we look at those in the forces, in the police, in the military, and elsewhere. Do we take on an individual, or we blame them for institutional problems?
Okay, as an individual. The law, it's as an individual.
Okay, so it has to be as an individual, as a fund X or Y or Z, not the institution.
Yeah, that's what even the law says.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, there is even a provision which I think started 2 financial years ago, where the individuals actually are even they are even forced to compensate if they are found guilty of torturing somebody. Yeah. So now that is one recommendation. Another one is what they call the ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. This will allow other organizations, in addition to the Uganda Human Rights Commission, to monitor detention centers. Because now it's only the Uganda Human Rights Commission which is allowed to go to all these detention centers. If SCTV, we have permission to go to prisons, we are the, I mean, it's only prisons we can go to, but we can't go to the barracks. So it would help to mitigate when they know that an organization is going to keep monitoring. It would help in mitigating torture occurrences. Then, of course, implementation, because the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act is not really being implemented. As I mentioned, that we have not yet got these perpetrators of torture punished, so that they serve as an example. There is also the Human Rights Enforcement Act, which was also passed in 2019, which also gives those violate human rights individually liable. So implementation of those 2 laws would are really the recommendations, the major recommendations from the civil and political rights cluster, which would like to be taken up this time around. Yes. Okay.
Susan, any specific or particular recommendations that you would also have to put before government?
One of them for me would be on the question of legal reform. The women's movement grapples with society's appreciation for promoting women's rights, and it tends to stretch into the national and the subnational legislators. There is a need for governments, both local and national, to appreciate women's rights and ensure that laws can also actually speak to the protection of women. Right now, we are starting the review process for the sexual offences bill, because it has been returned by the president. If you walked into any police station and asked about cases related to sexual offences, most of the complainants are female. Yes, there is a big problem in this country related to pushing for women's rights. So we need government to understand that promoting women's rights is not a problem. Now, legal reform is one thing. It is another thing to enforce and implement these laws. If we do not have resources to build a human resource, we do not have infrastructure for some of these laws to be enforced, then we continue to work in, it's just a futile venture. The other recommendation for me would be for the government to put in place social protection, substantive social protection measures for the average woman across the country. You and me would possibly manage, but the average woman, say in my district in Serere, at a certain point will have nothing to fall back to. We need care-related infrastructure, which is which has very minimal stress on their resources, on their pockets. We also need more wealth creation programs for women, which take into account the unique challenges that women have accessing credit, accessing capital, the issues of decision-making and control.
For financial inclusion?
Yes, for financial inclusion.
Okay.
That is very important.
Mr. Chirenga, finally from you in just 1.5 minutes, is there political will in all these things that we're doing, but because you seem to be working very closely with the state actors?
Yes, there is political will, because the mere fact that we have an environment in which to discuss these things, and the fact that government has committed itself in the process. We've worked with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and other actors, but of course a lot needs to be done, especially on the ground, because the Universal Periodic Review is one of the mechanisms in which we can realize the Sustainable Development Goals or the Agenda 2030. Now, the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable, are about your rights, your human being as a welfare. It's about the welfare of the human being. So I would urge all citizens to embrace this process, try to learn it, because it's all about the human being and his welfare.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all for joining me in studios this morning. Thanking you so much, Mr. Robert Chirenga, the Executive Director of the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders of Uganda. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Mr. Samuel Nsubuga Herbert from the Africa Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims. Karibu Sana. And of course, thank you so much, my sister, Susan Acheng from UONET. And thanking GIZ also for this discussion this morning on UBC TV on Good Morning Uganda Extra. Thank you so much. My name is Jagenda Semakola, wishing all the best for God and my country as we continue inspiring Uganda. Stay blessed. Good morning. Thank you very much.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
The Universal Periodic Review, UPR, is a mechanism under the United Nations where member states review each other's human rights situation every 4 years. It's a voluntary process where all states are